Welcome everybody, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed the time in their constituency and able to get caught up. We got able to get caught up in quite a lot of things, unless you're in Toronto, in which case you still can't get things like a haircut, but such is the case, we soldier on. Anyway, it is good to see everybody virtually, at least. This is the number 19th meeting of this committee, and it also happens to be our last meeting on this study topic. We have a very interesting panel today, which is going to bring us to a conclusion for our guest today. And for our members, all of these sound check and equipment checks have taken place in accordance with the motions we passed previously at this committee. To our witnesses, you have translation services available to you on your machine. You're welcome to and encouraged to speak in either or both official languages. You may be asked questions, and you will be asked questions in French and English. Because we are doing this virtually, if you could, it requires a little bit of patience, meaning wait until somebody else is finished talking before you start answering a question. And similarly, a reminder to our members to wait until witnesses finish speaking before you start your next question. So on that note, why don't we jump in? Each of our witness groups will be given up to 5 minutes to make a presentation. And at the conclusion of all of the presentations, we'll open the floor to questions. I will just warn our guests today that we do have time limits on presentations, which are 5 minutes, and time limits on questions for each member. So it is my job to interrupt from time to time to remind people that they are running or have run out of time, and I apologize in advance for doing so. So today we have BlackRock Metals, Mr. Sean Cleary from Electric Mobility Canada, Daniel Breton from Nano One Materials, we have Dan Blondell, and from Propulsion Quebec, we have Sarah Hood and Simone Thibault. So welcome everybody, thank you for coming. Why don't we start in the order I just ran through, which means, Mr. Cleary, you have the floor for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. My name is Sean Cleary. I'm Chairman, CEO at BlackRock Metals. We're building a $1.3 billion critical minerals project in Quebec. You can visit www.blackrockmetals.com for a summary of the project. This project consists of a fully integrated mine and metallurgical complex that will be built at the federally controlled industrial deep sea port located in Saguenay with access to the St. Lawrence and global markets. We'll produce 3 critical minerals: vanadium, titanium, and nodular iron. The BlackRock project is fully permitted by all governments and is one of the few projects in Canada that is shovel ready. We're now working to complete construction financing, start construction next year with full production in 2024. BlackRock is a commercial hydrogen user and early adopter uniquely designed to use gray hydrogen and enabled for the conversion to green hydrogen once commercially available. This is not a pilot project. The plant will be an example to the world that Canada can lead the way in zero emissions mining and metals production. The BlackRock project is where the critical minerals strategy and the hydrogen strategy meet. We have developed close relations with Aboriginal communities, having signed agreements with the Innu nations of Mastayash, Essapit, and Pessamit, and the Cree Nation government and the Ojibwe Band. These are major accomplishments. Recently, Dr. Abel Bosom, the Grand Chief of the Cree, spoke to this committee, specifically indicating that the Cree territory in Quebec is rich in vanadium. The Cree have been strong supporters of ours, realizing that the economic future of their youth passes through the responsible development of their mining potential, specifically critical minerals, offering long-lasting and stable careers to Aboriginal youth across Canada. Almost all vanadium comes from China, Brazil, South Africa, and Russia. However, vanadium has not been discussed at length in this committee. Vanadium is a critical mineral. It's on your list. It has been extremely important as a steel alloy and battery metal. Currently, North America has vanadium processing plants, but no primary source of vanadium. Canada has a world-class deposit of vanadium in Quebec, which is the Blackrock Project. Vanadium is a critical ingredient for batteries and steel. There is no steel without vanadium. We believe that a strong steel industry focused on zero emissions is at the core of every great nation. Without vanadium, Canada and our allies in America and Europe cannot have a steel industry. Vanadium doubles the strength of steel, resulting in stronger bridges, buildings, and safer cars using less steel. This is vital to meet product specs and beneficial for the environment. Life cycle analysis shows that the vanadium related to the steel rebar from the Blackrock project alone will save over 26 million tons per year of CO2. Also, there's no direct substitute for vanadium. Vanadium is also a key ingredient in electric flow batteries, increasingly used to store wind and solar electricity and balance the electric grid. In fact, the National Research Council of Canada has had a project investigating vanadium flow batteries to secure Canada's electric grid. Time will show that vanadium is a more important critical mineral than even lithium when it comes to battery production and electricity storage. Vanadium batteries can easily be recycled, and accordingly, its importance will grow over the next decade as utilities look to safely store green energy economically. Canada can be a global leader in vanadium. Since Blackrock can produce over 5% of total global output for vanadium per year for the next 70 years. So I think we'd like to say certain things that we could agree on. One, we have a critical minerals list, but that won't change anything unless major funding, policy, and strategy follows. Two, the capital markets are knowledgeable on base and precious metals, but there are no pools of capital available for critical minerals. Three, unfair trade practices from foreign regimes who do not follow market rules and manipulate markets, including vanadium, stifles competition and new entrants. Four, we need appropriate government engagement and willpower to drive critical minerals forward and secure the steel supply chain. Five, the Blackrock project is entirely centered around ESG, and government should follow this lead to place the critical minerals industry within such a framework to help attract major capital. Six, we need the federal government to be openly supportive. If we want to be a major player in the critical minerals space, it will be necessary to invest significant capital. And lastly, we would say that, we've been having the same talk about this. Right now, it's really just talk. And if we don't do something concrete about it, Canada will be left behind on critical minerals supply. Like to thank everybody. That concludes my remarks. Thank you to the members of the committee for having invited me and taking the time to listen. I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary, particularly for staying right on time. Mr. Baton, over to you.
Thank you. I think you've got actually the names mixed up. This is Dan Blondell from Nano One as opposed to Dan Breton from the other company. So I believe it's you that you want Nano One to go next.
Actually, no, I was going to get electric mobility to go next, but if you're okay. Go, fine too. So.
No, that's fine.
Go ahead. All
right, I will. Okay. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Dan.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Blondell. I speak French well, but I will make my statement in English because I've left Montreal some time ago. English comes easier.
Founder of Nano One Materials. I'm based here in Burnaby, British Columbia. Nano One is a clean technology company, and we're changing how the world makes battery materials. We have developed a battery agnostic platform for the industrial production of cathode materials used inside lithium-ion batteries. We have 35 employees. We're 100% Canadian grown, expertise in engineering, material science, business, financing. We have 16 patents now issued and at least another 30 pending in jurisdictions around the world that include Canada, the US, China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. We are publicly listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, and we are well financed, and we are also honored and privileged to have the ongoing financial support of SDTC and BC's ICE Fund. Our processing technology uses critical minerals inputs such as lithium, nickel, manganese, and cobalt to make high-performance cathode materials used in lithium-ion batteries. We differ from other chemical producers because our technology eliminates the need for intermediate products, energy, and the associated costs and environmental footprint, and it uses 1/20th of the water and eliminates a significant waste stream. As I said, this reduces cost, energy, logistics, waste, water, and carbon footprint while enhancing battery durability. It could save up to $1 billion, just for reference, for every 1.5 to 2 million electric vehicles that are made. It all starts with mining, of course, but where does all this go? Who turns those metals into battery materials, and who puts them into cells, and who builds the battery packs that go into cars? Unless we start making battery materials here in North America and battery cells, we will continue to ship our raw materials to Asia, only to bring them back to Canada for production. Europe is busy playing catch up, and North America is really still at ground zero in these terms. And this presents a tremendous opportunity, I believe, in North America. China and the rest of Asia are established, well established, and they did so very early, but this has left them with a fragmented and entrenched domestic supply chain, which we believe is vulnerable to disruption. Necessity is also driving Europe, of course, and to a domestic low-carbon integrated supply chain. Yet, all this legacy cathode production and chemical production and supply chains persist, and with lots of water, waste, and carbon footprint issues. So Canada is not beholden to these incumbent ways because those systems are not yet in place. And herein lies the opportunity to be a better technology and value chain leader. A process like Nano One's can help integrate the supply chain in Canada and lead the world away from entrenched and wasteful methods. It can help Canadian miners gain an ESG and premium advantage over foreign producers of sulfate and hydroxide and other intermediary products. It can help car companies with ESG, cost, and performance imperatives, but it will require government stimulus, private sector collaboration, implementation, and supply chain integration. We are innovators, but we are also collaborators, and we are looking to move mountains. Nano One's relationships span the global battery supply chain, from responsible miners to cathode producers and OEMs. If we can leverage Canada's rich experience in responsible mining, clean energy generation, environmental stewardship, technology leadership, and battery innovation, we can establish Canada as the greenest, most technologically advanced, and highly integrated battery materials production ecosystem in the world. Before it's too late, and before we are forced to be reactive with Me Too solutions, it is a Canada-wide strategic imperative to support the build-out of this very ecosystem. Clearly, it's a global effort, and there are opportunities all around the world. So how can we make Canada the center of gravity for these efforts? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Blondel. And now we will go back to Mr. Breton.
Good morning. Do you hear me well? Hello, and we would like to thank the members of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources for hearing us on this issue. My name is Danielle Breton, and I am President and CEO of Electric Mobility Canada. Founded in 2006, Electric Mobility Canada is one of the first organizations in the world dedicated to electric mobility. Its members include electric utilities, mining companies, vehicle manufacturers, charging infrastructure providers, technology companies, companies, research centers, government departments, cities, universities, fleet managers, unions, environmental NGOs, and electrical vehicle owner groups. Electric Mobility Canada is the national organization with the most experience and expertise in helping to advance thinking, regulation, and projects in transportation electrification. According to an Electric Mobility Canada 2020 analysis, a Canadian transportation electrification strategy inspired by those of BC, Quebec, California.
Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt our witness, but the volume of the interpretation is actually a little quieter than the witness, so we can't really hear the English translation. So I just wanted to see if that can be corrected.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, just continue on.
Issue.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Lloyd, you are or you're not?
I was having a similar issue, but
You were, okay.
We'll give it a go. We'll make it work. Don't worry. I don't want to interrupt the witness again. So thanks, Chair.
Okay. Sorry, carry on, Mr. Breton.
Okay.
According to an Electric Mobility Canada 2020 analysis, a Canadian transportation electrification strategy inspired by those of BC, Quebec, and California could generate up to $200 billion in revenue between 2021 and 2030 and create tens of thousands of new jobs. Electric Mobility Canada, in collaboration with other Canadian industry stakeholders, will formally announce in May the launch of a Canadian ZEV supply chain coalition to help accelerate Canada's industrial transition to transportation electrification. In addition, we will soon be releasing a report on the state of the art in transportation electrification in Canada that will include natural resource aspects.
EMC therefore recommends that our governments adjust their views and emphasis on certain critical minerals, metals, and materials, specifically to recognize the importance of securing and maintaining a Canadian and North American energy independence, to shift our focus from fossil fuel-based energy to securing a robust supply of all key metals, minerals, and materials needed for our emerging North American battery supply chain, and to develop the industrial policy needed to unlock the critical North American production needed to mine the minerals and metals, build the batteries, charging stations, and electric vehicles needed to transition our economy to a zero-emission transportation system. According to the Electric Vehicle Outlook 2020 from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, EV growth from passenger cars to light trucks to heavy trucks to electric buses will be exponential in the years to come. Passenger EV sales jumped from 450,000 in 2015 to 1 million in 2019. They are expected to reach 8.5 million in 2025, 26 million by 2030. New EV sales should grow from 2.7% in 2020 to 28% in 2030 and 58% in 2040. According to a newly released report by TD Economics, it is estimated that by 2050, up to 450,000 of Canada's current 600,000 direct and indirect jobs in oil and gas could become casualties of falling demand for fossil fuel as more countries and companies commit to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. According to another report called The Fast Lane, Tracking the Energy Revolution from Clean Energy Canada, there will be approximately 560,000 clean jobs by 2030, almost 50% in clean jobs in transportation. Demand for clean energy and clean transportation jobs will keep growing at a very fast rate. This means that there will be a job transition over the next decades, just like we saw at the beginning of the 20th century when transportation went from horse and buggy to automobiles. These new jobs will be in mining, assembly, research and development, design, sales, maintenance, electricity, constructions, and these high-quality, high-paying jobs will be across the country from BC to Atlantic Canada. As we can see in the graphs that we have in the document that we sent you, China is comfortably ahead of other countries in controlling the supply chain of strategic minerals needed for electric vehicles, electronics, gas vehicles, military equipment, etc. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, China presently controls 80% of the refining of these materials and 77% of the world's battery cell manufacturing capacity. When we add South Korea and Japan, we can see that 96% of the battery production capacity is controlled by Asian companies. Just like we saw in the 20th century, with the world dependence on oil coming from the Middle East, the geopolitical implications of the world's dependence on rare earths and battery capacity from China is at the heart of the discussion for the future of electric mobility from economic, environmental, and geopolitical point of view. That's why Electric Mobility Canada fully supports the Canadian and US government's agreement on the importance of development of a zero-emission vehicle future and Canada-US battery strategy. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Breton. And last, from Propulsion Quebec, I don't know who's going to start us, whether it's Ms. Hood or Mr. Thibault. Ms. Hood, I'm seeing
Yes.
fingers are pointed at you, so you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I am accompanied by my colleague Simon Thibault, who is our expert on batteries in our team. Thank you to all. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, as President and CEO of Propulsion Quebec, Quebec's electric and intelligent transportation industry cluster, and on behalf of our 220 members, I'd like to thank the members of the Standing Committee of Natural Resources for inviting me to present our vision on positioning Canada as a responsible source of critical and strategic minerals, which I will refer to for the purposes of this presentation, CSMs, and developing the Canadian electric vehicle battery industry. As you know, Canada occupies a unique position on a global scale. Not only does our country have vast resources in CSMs, especially those in high demand in the context of energy transition, clean technology deployment, and sustainable economic recovery post-COVID-19, but it also has recognized expertise in responsible industrial developments, such as in the mining and chemicals sectors, and an energy mix dominated in some parts of the country by low-carbon, low-cost renewables. And we have one of the most stringent environmental regulatory frameworks in the world, a skilled workforce, and above all, a stable and predictable geopolitical context. And we believe these strengths reinforce Canada's position as a safe, stable, and sustainable supplier of CSMs and battery components. Three terms that must be at the heart of any sustainable pan-Canadian CSM and battery development strategy. If Canada is to be successful in developing these industries, a fourth dimension must be added to these key factors, which is the pan-Canadian approach to this strategy. Indeed, as other major international players active in these same sectors have already demonstrated, there's no single regional entity capable of combining the natural resources, mining, the technical and technological capacities required to develop these resources, and the indispensable financial capabilities to develop these sectors on its own territory without interstate synergy. That's why it is of the utmost importance that the Canadian government play a role in coordinating the actions of each of the provinces and territories through the creation of a vast Canadian alliance dedicated to the development of the CSM and battery industry by building on the strength and assets of each province. And in addition, Canada must take advantage of its historical position as an ally of the United States to work towards the creation of a North American coalition that will allow the Canadian CSM and battery industrial ecosystem to position itself as a secure, stable, and sustainable supplier of value-added materials and components, and not just unprocessed raw materials, for the fast-growing markets of electric vehicles and energy transition, among others. This same continental positioning is not only strategic for North America, but also for our European partners, who are also banking on the consolidation of competitive, green, and circular supply chains of battery materials and components for their own electric vehicle and energy storage markets, especially in the wake of the recent adoption of the battery directive by the European Union. European Commission, Canada is now facing an economic opportunity that cannot be ignored, and it is a unique opportunity to rebuild our economy on new and promising foundations for the future by integrating best practices in environmental and social responsibility, circularity, example, recycling, industrial waste reclamation, and transparency, example, supply chain traceability. To achieve this, Canada must work to build a pan-Canadian alliance that will leverage the strengths of each province and territory with the goal of positioning itself as a global leader in the responsible and sustainable production of value-added components for Western industries that depend on a secure and stable supply chain of CSMs. If we don't do this, it will be a missed opportunity, an unprecedented opportunity for our country. And I'll leave the last minutes left to me to my colleague Simon. Just a few seconds. What I would like to highlight is what we need by added value components in the Canadian context, and we can answer your questions on this, but what we mean by this is everything that is a cathode material, an anode material, an active component of battery and cells. So those are the targets that need to be prioritized to develop an integrated vertical supply chain for the batteries of electric vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll end our first round of questions for 6 minutes, starting with Mr. McLean.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all our guests today. I think it's going to be a very informative meeting for what we've seen so far, and really appreciate all the input we're getting so far. I'm going to focus my questions this morning on Mr. Breton from Electric Mobility Canada, please. Mr. Breton, very quickly, can you tell us the budget of your organization, where you get your revenue from?
%95% of the budget come from the members.
Can you extrapolate on that, please? The members, and what members, as in the government members, and how much they're contributing?
Oh, I'd say that less than 5%.
Okay.
I would say that most of our members are vehicle manufacturers, utilities, infrastructure providers, research centers. So
research centers that are funded by government and utilities that are funded by the public?
Well, some utilities are funded by the public. Some of them are private. It depends on if you talk to OPG or Hydro-Québec, it's differently funded because some of them are private, some of them are public.
Well, OPG is significantly funded by the government of Canada, or pardon me, the government of Ontario. Quebec Hydro is a crown corporation. So they're all really subsidized organizations of the taxpayer and the governments of Canada and the provinces that are your. So tell me the size of your budget.
We have a size of budget about $2 million a year.
Okay, so
and I would say that, as I said, infrastructure providers or EV groups or environmental groups or vehicle manufacturer companies like New Flyer. These are all private companies.
Thank you.
Most of our members are private companies.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to go through a bit of a indication of statistics here. The government funds, the federal government funds electric vehicles $5,000 per vehicle right now in a program. They fund $300 million to vehicle buyers, $72 million of which goes to Tesla, $130 million to charging stations, most of which are sourced in the United States, $500 million to auto makers that have plants in Canada that are American companies, and it gives 100% write-offs to companies that are buying electric vehicles at this point in time. So I would say that we're at the edge of a very, very subsidized industry by the people of Canada. And I'm going to quote the CFO from Transport Canada when asked about this at a Senate committee in October 2020. The biggest winner among these car companies is California-based Tesla, with more than. But what are these sales doing to lower emissions? The Trudeau government doesn't know, according to Mr. Pilgrim, who testified before the Senate committee. So this is something we're looking at right now. Can you tell us at the end of the day, with some definitiveness that the government hasn't been able to provide so far, what are the net emissions associated with electric vehicles?
Well, actually, there will be a report that will be out in a few weeks talking about net emissions from electric vehicles compared to equivalent gas vehicles, which is between, I'd say, 20 and 50% lower by vehicle whether you are in Quebec, in Manitoba, or you're in Alberta. But even in Alberta, greenhouse gas emissions from electric vehicles are lower than that of gas vehicles. And there will be an NRC report published in a few months, and an EMC report in a few weeks, actually, that will be out, giving all the details on that. But all in all, if what you're saying is that we are subsidizing an industry, we are also subsidizing other industries, and we are making a transition. So if you want to transition from fossil fuel industry to a greener industry, it's a shift that the government wants to support, and that's what's happening across the world. But yes, we are lowering greenhouse gas emissions where we're going from gas vehicles to electric vehicles, whether it's light duty or heavy duty.
So it's safe to say you're lowering emissions at the tailpipe, but
no. I'm talking about all life cycle emissions, not just the tailpipe.
Most studies show that the life cycle emissions in Canada are not that significant at all. So the amount we're getting bang for buck is actually very little in the switch over to electric vehicles.
Well, the data you have must be obsolete, because I can show you the data where we see that we have significant difference in greenhouse gas emissions from cradle to grave.
Okay,
so from extraction of natural resources to assembly of vehicles to the use of vehicles to the.
Okay, tell me where the power comes from once we do away with the internal combustion engine. Right now, electricity provides about, call it 1/3 of the power in Canada. If we do away with self-sustained diesel, internal combustion engines, etc., where will the electric power come from?
Well, already 82% of the electricity production in Canada comes from non-emitting sources, whether it's...
Well, we're not talking about electricity. We're talking about replacing power from other sources besides electricity and moving them to electricity. So where is the extra electricity going to come from?
Well, actually, since electric vehicles, whether it's light duty or heavy duty, are much more efficient than gas vehicles, for that matter, because you need pretty much like 1/3 of the energy that you use in a gas vehicle, you will need for an electric vehicle. So it means that you need proportionally less energy to make electric vehicles run than gas vehicles. So we will need more electricity, that's for sure. But I mean, there's huge potential in renewables.
So the question remains: where are we going to source this electricity?
I'm going to have to interrupt both of you. Unfortunately, we're a little bit over time on that segment, and move on to Mr. Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank all the witnesses for joining today. I'd like to pick up where my colleague left off with asking some questions from Mr. Baton from EMC. And I've had a chance to read through some of your advocacy, and it seems it really does revolve around driving demand in Canada for EVs. And I hadn't seen so much reporting on natural resources itself and how that fits into this. So I'll look forward to see your new reporting on this that you mentioned earlier in your opening. But looking at your boards, it's quite a diverse group: utilities, EV charging infrastructure, EV manufacturers, mining companies. And it's a good example of how the whole ecosystem works together or could work together. And, maybe my first question for you is, in this community so far, we've heard that we have much of the critical minerals that we need in Canada. But there is an opportunity for the transformation and value addition to be happening here. So my question to you is, how do we make sure that what's mined in Canada is also processed in Canada and then not just shipped abroad as raw material and then coming back to Canada as a finished product?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's why we will announce in May that we'll put together the ZEV Supply Chain Alliance, and Propulsion Quebec will be part of that group. But we have to work together to come up with a national strategy if we don't want to make the same mistakes that we've made in the past with wood, for instance, or oil. We want to refine as much products as we can in Canada, and working in partnership with the US as well. I mean, As Sarah Hood very aptly said, the Europeans are moving forward with this European strategy. The Chinese are leading the way. So if we want to have a Canadian and or North American strategy, we have to make sure that all the key players in Canada work together and see that there's a historic opportunity for Canada to become a key player in the world. But we have to have a plan. We don't have a plan yet. We don't have an electric mobility strategy yet. So that's why we think that working with the Canadian government and the provinces will ensure that people see the great opportunity that there is right now. But we don't have 5 years to act. I can tell you that, because right now things are moving really quickly on the world, across the world. Things are happening really quickly, especially with the Biden administration coming to power. So we have to act quick. The timing is now.
I appreciate that answer, and I think we want to make sure we don't follow into the kind of the IKEA model where we're just assembling here. And there's been some very strategic investments the government of Canada has made recently, both within Ontario and then more recently in Quebec with one of your members of Lion Electric. But I'm curious where you would see the strategic investments of government best be placed to ensure that we have that transformation activities happening in Canada.
Well, we have to make sure that people across Canada see that there's an opportunity. So in Nova Scotia, we have expertise. In Quebec, we have expertise. In Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC. So that's why when Sarah said, we have to find some ways to coordinate the actions to make sure that we don't work in silos, I think that's the best way for us to move forward. So I think the Canadian government should invest in research and development, that's for sure. But we have to invest in policies as well to make the transition not only for critical minerals and metals, but also for training and retraining of workers. In the document, one thing that I forgot to mention is the fact that we will have to train and retrain a lot of people right now that will lose their jobs. We've seen that with Kodak. We've seen that with Blockbuster. I mean, many new technologies are disruptive, so they create a new economy, but we have to get the Canadian government to help those workers being trained and retrained.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask some questions of Mr. Blondell. And I actually had a chance to be at your facility, gosh, about 1.5 years ago for an important announcement. And Mr. Blondell, maybe my first question is, where do you source your lithium from for your lithium-ion batteries?
Thank you, Patrick. As a technology company, we're developing the methods to make the cathode materials. So we source it from any number of different areas. We're not using large volumes of it in our laboratories right now, and we are not aiming to be a producer. Rather, we are a technology provider of. It would be our customer who would then source large volumes of lithium and cobalt and nickel and manganese from various areas. Primarily, I would say the bulk of the world's lithium is coming out of a central few areas in the world. It's going to be coming out of South America, Chile, Argentina. There's obviously a lot of lithium coming out of China and Australia as well, and quite possibly in Canada if we can get our lithium sort of production up to the kind of volumes we need in terms of where it comes from. So we would prefer to see it coming from Canada. We prefer to see cathode production happening in Canada. We believe we can make it not only more efficient, but we can also help drive down some of the costs of converting that lithium into a battery-ready material, because our process simplifies the sort of the in-between processes.
And that's great. And maybe as a follow-up to that, what level of coordination and partnership are you having with some of the Canadian EV manufacturers and other companies involved in the supply chain?
So the bulk of our coordination is happening with the large multinational OEMs. So I would say we have relationships with the large American OEMs, the European OEMs, and the and Asian OEMs on the automotive side of things, and then we also work upstream with the miners. That would include a number of the critical miners around the world. So on the metals side, there's whether that's what used to be a Canadian company, Inco, now Vale, or Russian entities like like Nornickel or Australian BHP. So there's your kind of sort of metal side of thing. And then the lithium side of things, it would be working with, we have a relationship actually in Chile with the Chilean government working with their lithium producers. And so
Thanks,
they're...
Mr. Blondell, I'm going to have to stop you there.
That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Smart, over to you.
Merci, James.
Thank you very much, James. Now, having heard Craig, I understand why conservatives believe that climate change does not exist, but I want to point out that in the last 4 years, some 24 million was sent to, gas affiliates. And so if transport industry were to get to 20% of that, I'd be a happy man in Quebec. A quick question to Mr. Cleary. Your project is in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean in Quebec. I thought it was going to be developed around 2019, but it was pushed back. Of course, there's a COVID context, but how come it hasn't yet got off the ground in Saguenay?
Well, we've been working on environmental permitting, so that's largely completed. We have a certificate of authorization for both the mine, which is located near Chibougamau, and the metallurgical complex in Saguenay for both. There are a lot of conditions tied to responsibly developing this project from an environmental perspective. And finally, I would say that funding for these projects, which are large, and is difficult. Capital is scarce. As I mentioned in my presentation, the area of critical minerals, for the large part, especially niche minerals like vanadium and titanium, which are critical and on the critical minerals list, are not well followed by the capital markets. So this has to be financed privately and with public-private partnerships. And so we've been working with all of the finance team to be able to do that. And we hope to complete that later this year. But it's ongoing right now.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much. Now, very quickly, a question for Mr. Breton. In your presentation, you talk about an announcement that will be made in May by you and other partners. Could you give us more information about the announcement? Yes. We began some months ago working on a pan-Canadian alliance on the electrification of transport and we think there is a historic opportunity. For those who don't recall, in 2009, when GM and Chrysler were on the board of bankruptcy, the U.S. assistance was sent to those two manufacturers in exchange for electrification of transportation. But that same thing was not done north of the border. So we believe we did not take advantage of the opportunity at the time. Now we're in 2021, and we think the opportunity is here again. But there will not be another opportunity. So we have the electrification of transportation happening worldwide, China, Europe, elsewhere. So we have a historic opportunity now, and that's why I've been working for months, bringing together a number of partners on the manufacture of automobile parts, as well as mining and others. We want to sit down at the table with federal government and see how we can align the stakeholders. And next months are critical. When we talk about subsidies of electric vehicles compared to fossil fuels, there's an element we often neglect. There's a report by Health Canada that talks about the cost of atmospheric pollution, which is 120 billion a year. When you think that 30 of all the percentages of COT, as well as all of that we want to electrify, will actually reduce greenhouse gases, and also the costs for health in Canada. We're saving thousands of lives. We have going to save millions of dollars. So electrification of transport for economic reasons as well as health reasons. Thank you. If I have a bit of time left, you talked about 450,000 jobs and maybe some also direct jobs. Now, how can we recoup these kinds of jobs with the transition? You talk about new technologies generating hundreds of thousands of new jobs. Could Alberta even transform its economy? If it were to shift to a low carbon economy, I think there is historic opportunity for all provinces, be you in Alberta or elsewhere. Workers need to be able to make the transition too. When we talk to Unifor and we have people working there in gas and mining and elsewhere, we don't want some to have, jobs, but then those who are making the shift can't find workers. So we have to train and retrain workers. Otherwise, we'll miss an extremely important historic rendezvous. All to say that transition is already occurring around the world. The transition should not exclude workers, should not set aside workers. Alberta, Saskatchewan would be very good examples of this. I grew up in a region where the jobs my parents did no longer exist. Those jobs were transferred to Mexico. So we have children, we have grandchildren. We don't want to reduce all of the atmospheric pollution by creating jobs abroad. We want to create the jobs here at home. And the electrification of transport can contribute. So can extraction, so can maintenance of infrastructures. Do I have any time left, James? No.
Over to you, Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the witnesses here today. I'll start by echoing what Monsieur Simard said, in that I'm disappointed in that the line of questioning that Mr. McLean took. It seems that Conservatives are really desperately trying to find ways that this transition cannot work, when the science is really telling us that we must find ways to make it work. And it would seem that there are challenges, but there are also these immense opportunities for us that we've been talking about. And I'd like to let Mr. Breton continue on that theme by talking about, he mentioned, you cited statistics on how fast the shift to electric vehicles will be happening. I think there's I read a KPMG report that said 70% of Canadians said their next vehicle would be an electric vehicle. So I think this is happening faster than most people think. And as you say, there will be, as that proceeds, there will be jobs lost in the oil sector. But there are, as you said, I think 500,000, was that the number of jobs you said could be created in the clean energy sector, in mining, assembly, construction, you mentioned. Just wondering if you could maybe go into more detail on what we need to do to get those workers ready. How much training will be needed? A lot of construction work is probably fairly transferable, but mining, I assume that those jobs are transferable, but what kind of training do we need?
Well, if I can answer quickly, first of all, I mean, there will be a fast transition towards electric mobility. And we've seen that like 30 years ago with personal computers. Hardly anybody had a personal computer. 20 years ago, who had internet, and 10 years ago, how many people did have a smartphone? So the switch will be exponential like we've seen in those technologies. So if we want to be ahead to embrace the switch to cleaner technologies, we have to understand that, these 560,000 jobs that we're talking about in the clean mobility, clean energy, will be in assembly. Like we've seen that there was an announcement over the last fall, with Ford and Chrysler and GM. So workers in these assembly plants will be retooling and will be retrained so that they can start assembling electric vehicles. So that's one part. But there's also the part in research and development. We have to emphasize research and development on electric mobility, on critical minerals and metals. We have to make sure that people see that there's a great potential for infrastructure deployment as well. But there are some issues with infrastructure because you don't need the same infrastructure when you're at home, for instance, than when you're in downtown Montreal, Calgary, or Toronto. So we will need to do research and development to make sure that we make a clean transition. So all that will be part of the job transition. Plus, I mean, selling an electric vehicle is not the same as selling a gas vehicle. I can tell you that because I was the first homologated trainer in Quebec regarding electric vehicles. So I trained a lot of people. People have to know how to work and operate the electric vehicles, whether they're light or heavy duty. We will need to do courses for high school and college and universities. So these are all new jobs. I mean, we've been talking to many colleges and universities over the past few months because they're looking at new programs, to help train these peoples and educate these people so that we have the future engineers and the future chemists. So there's opportunities, but the federal government and the provinces have to be in tune with that transition. And the Trudeau government said that they wanted to create a lot, more than 1 million jobs in clean technologies. We have to make sure that we are there to help not only the future workers, but the present workers.
And I'd just like to follow up again on some of these challenges. Mr. McLean mentioned the challenge of, where are we going to get this clean energy to fuel these electric vehicles? I just wonder if you could comment on some of the ways we can overcome that and the ways that we have to overcome it.
Well, first of all, Canada is better positioned than most countries in the world regarding electricity production because already 82% of our electricity production comes from non-emitting sources like wind power, hydroelectric, nuclear. So that means that already a lot of the job has been done. And by 2023, the government of Alberta announced that they would close their last coal plants. So it means that we already are much cleaner than, let's say, the US or China or India or Europe for that matter. But for more electricity, there's great potential in wind power and energy efficiency and hydropower and solar power even. And not to mention the fact that with what we call vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, we will make part of the storage of energy come from the vehicles themselves. The electric vehicles will be part of the management, the smart management of energy in the future, meaning that during rush hour, for instance, if we need a lot of electricity, we won't charge the vehicles. We will use the energy from the electric vehicles. And when we are outside of peak time, peak power capacity, we will use that capacity to recharge the vehicles. So we will make sure that the electric vehicles is part of the power grid as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kennings.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're moving into our second round of 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I'll start by pushing back against, some of the assertions that it is irresponsible somehow for Conservatives to be, asking questions about what our electricity makeup is going to be in a future where there's more electric vehicles. We're looking at this problem 2 steps and 3 steps ahead, not at the problem immediately in front of us. And the fact is that for many, many decades, one of Canada's greatest comparative economic advantages has been our cheap electricity. And as Mr. Breton noted, 60% from hydroelectricity, 15% from nuclear, just about 7% from renewable power sources like wind and solar. And my huge concern is we've seen a new hydroelectric dam being built in British Columbia at now $16 billion, billions over cost. In Alberta, in my own riding, the cost to shut down coal-fired electrical units cost billions in taxpayer dollars to bail out the companies that were shutting down their coal and transitioning to natural gas. And in the province of Ontario, we see taxpayers due to experiments with developing green energy back in the 2000s, taxpayers are now subsidizing electrical rates between the 30%. And so to my question, Mr. Breton, following up on Mr. McLean's question, when we see that these electric vehicles are going to create a huge pull on the electrical grid, and we've already seen electricity costs are growing faster than inflation, where is the new electricity going to come from to pay for this? Or are we going to see electrical rates go through the roof and make electric vehicles less affordable?
Actually, no, because as I said before, because of vehicle to grid and vehicle to home management, we will be able to save money in the end and even get customers money in their pockets because we'll be able to use more smartly the grid that we have right now. There was a scientist that I spoke to a few months ago in the US, and he said one thing that's very interesting is he said, let's say that Nikola Tesla came back to life today, or Thomas Edison came back to life, or Alexander Graham Bell came back to life today. And Alexander Graham Bell would be very impressed by the new technologies in the phone, Smartphones, big difference. When you're looking at grid technology, not much has changed over 100 years. So we have to be smarter with our grid so that we are more efficient in the way we manage it. And electric vehicles, whether it's light duty or heavy duty, will not only make the rate be reasonable, but it will help the rates go down for customers because of vehicle to grid and vehicle to home management. So that's something that people don't know about very often. It's a new way of thinking about the future of energy, but smart energy management with electric mobility will make a huge difference for customers.
I do find that very hard to believe, Mr. Breton. If we have, 30 million Canadians driving electric vehicles or 20 million Canadians, that is going to create huge capacity. And I agree, there's always room for more efficiencies on the grid and updating the grid, but we are going to need new capacity. But I'll move on to the next question. We know that.
Can I answer that?
Well, you can answer it maybe after I just finish this next question, but thank you. Or send it in writing afterwards. But we know that fossil fuel vehicles, there's a diesel excise tax, there's a gasoline excise tax, 10 cents a liter, 4 cents a liter. Then there's the provincial excise taxes. This is somewhat of a public policy question, but there's billions of dollars raised every year that goes in towards building our road infrastructure. And we know that electric vehicles need to use roads as much as fossil fuel vehicles. Do you have any sort of suggestions on how is the government going to be able to pay for this road infrastructure in the future when they're losing billions of dollars in fuel excise revenues?
That's a great question. Thank you for that question. Because actually what that shows is that the business model for financing the roads is obsolete. Because if we want to lower our greenhouse gas emissions, lower our oil consumption anywhere in the world, we will have to stop relying solely on gas tax to finance the roads. So we have to have a national discussion on that. And it's the same issue in Quebec or Europe or Toronto or the US. But it is a very important issue, but I think that we can find a solution. But as I said earlier, if we save billions of dollars in health costs, well, this is a way for us to help finance the roads if you want to look at it that way. But we have to think about a new way to finance the roads. But your question makes total sense.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have about 15 seconds.
Okay, well, I'll just thank the witness for his great questions, our great back and forth. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Lloyd. Okay, so we're on now to Mr. Lefebvre.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My questions to the great panel that we have today. I want to maybe express that I was part of this, a member of the sitting government. We believe that climate change is real. We see that clean energy and certainly this study that we're embarking on about critical minerals. This is a huge opportunity for Canada. This is an economic opportunity. These are jobs, and this is the way of the future, and we want to be leaders in this sector. With that being said, I really want to thank the panelists. It's been a very, very, very informative. Je vais commencer, Madame Hood.
Let me begin with Ms. Hood. We didn't hear much from you, and I know you have a lot to say, along with your colleague, Mr. Thibault. You have talked about solutions, Canada being a worldwide leader in this sector. So I would like to talk about subsidies. Sudbury, we have 9 mines in operation. There's a lot of research underway, but we realize the importance of nickel, copper, and all of the rare minerals. You talked about a pan-Canadian alliance and a North American coalition, and you talk about circularity, traceability. These are very important issues as we develop a national strategy. Can you give us more examples? And can you compare Canada to other regions? You've already compared Canada to Europe. In Canada, a number of provinces are already part of the solution, but everybody together can be a comprehensive solution, but we need the federal government to coordinate. Nickel and the mines you have in Sudbury, that's an excellent example. You produce nickel in Ontario, and that could complement the Quebec mining offering to produce cells. And those same cells could be assembled in battery crap and also used in vehicles in Ontario. We could pursue R&D with all of the expertise we have in Nova Scotia, for instance. There are vehicle manufacturers and I mean, outside of just passenger cars, there are number of manufacturers of electric vehicles, even in Manitoba. So that's where we see the role of the Canadian government to coordinate, to create continental autonomy, to create what Europe is already doing with the production of batteries. They have continental autonomy in Europe. Asia's already done that. We need to be independent of those other regions in the world. And then all depending of the conditions, be it a pandemic or difficult trade relations, what is important is to have full control on the strategic resource, which is, going to displace many Canadians in the future. We had a witness a few weeks ago from Europe, and I asked the question, how many of these critical or rare minerals do you have in Europe? And he started to laugh. It's a fact. They want to develop, the supply chain here, but they're going to get the resources here and take it to Europe. Now I have a question for Mr. Cleary from BlackRock. I understand you've said there needs to be more federal government support, perhaps in terms of investment in the mining sector. We're talking about extraction here, to be able to extract those critical minerals. Now, when you talk, say, about processing the foundries, where would that be done? Where would these rare minerals be refined?
Thank you for your question. Well, in the case of the BlackRock project, the vanadium and titanium and the iron fraction are going to be refined in Saguenay. That's an important element of our project, is that it's an integrated project and that we'll be able to send these to market. Now, we are fully permitted for an additional ferrovanadium plant to be located in Saguenay, which would supply both the steel industry and the battery industry. That is phase 2 of our overall construction plan. Yep. And we would look to have that put in place a couple of years after the start of production.
Awesome.
So initially, we will process some of these materials at existing facilities that are partnered with us out of Europe.
Thanks, Mr. Cleary. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Okay, we're on to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I don't know if Madame Oud or Mr. Thibault could answer my next question. Earlier, Mr. Thibault, you ended your short intervention by talking about value-added components. A few weeks ago, we had Metal Tongat. They do transformation of terra oxide. It's a similar process to that for the production of aluminum through I found that interesting. I wonder if you could give us examples of value-added products that we could have in Quebec. Yes, actually, Thorngate was a good example. They're a member of Propulsion Quebec, and they are in the rare mineral sector. But if you take just the Quebec ecosystem on its own, or the Ontario ecosystem, we have lithium mines. We can think of critical elements, galicium, North American lithium, and Mason graphite. and others in nickel in Ontario. There are even Quebec companies that are working in the nickel sector in Ontario. But the example of Thorngate with a transformation process that can be developed in Quebec or in Canada in general, there are many. We've done studies with our members who, and there really are very few projects in Quebec or in the rest of Canada that cannot go into, second, third, fourth transformation in Canada. But there's no barrier to stop you from doing so in Canada. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a question of incentive. They need support to develop that second, third, fourth transformation here in Canada. So the best way to put in place those incentives, I believe Madame Oud underscored that the federal government could play a role as coordinator, but beyond that, there's no Canadian strategy on the transformation of these critical minerals, is there? Well, in Quebec, we have investment models, and it would be very interesting to have a similar model developed in the rest of Canada, or the Canada Infrastructure Bank involved to target some of the projects in batteries and MCs, because our ultimate goal is to have electric vehicles on our road and solar panels and wind turbines manufactured on Canadian soil.
Thanks, Mr. Smart. Mr. Cannings?
Well, thank you. And I think I'd like to turn to Mr. Blondell. And we've been, throughout this study, been hearing so much about the value-added chains that we need to create in Canada. You mentioned the battery value chain. I've talked previously in the study about we have a graphite mine in my riding that really would like to produce graphite for battery anodes that were manufactured in Canada instead of in China. And I just wondered if you could expand on your comments as to what the government can and should be doing to incentivize those value chains, to integrate them. What really needs to be done in the short time that we have to make this move.
Great. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Canning. I think we hear a lot about the mining end of it, and we hear a lot about the electric vehicles and the charging and everything. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in between, and that's all the value add. So you mine the ore, and then it has to be refined into a useful metal, and then it has to be converted into a useful battery chemical, which then all of them come together, get combined into a cathode material. And the anode's a little bit simpler because it's just graphite. It might get mixed with silicone, but the same kind of thing happens on either of the electrodes. And those, and that's all before it ever gets into a battery cell and into a battery module and into a battery pack and into an electric vehicle. So there are many transformation steps through this whole process. I'm here as a witness to talk about critical minerals and the transformation of those critical minerals. My agenda, of course, the transformation of those critical minerals into something useful in a battery. What I want to underscore is that if we don't, we need to fix that middle supply chain. We need to be making cathode materials and anode materials for assembly into a battery cell here in North America and preferably in Canada. If we're going to avoid shipping our raw materials, of course, overseas and have them come back in the form of a battery. So I think ultimately that's critical. So what can the government do? Look, the government is already supporting a company like Nano One through SDTC and a variety of other sort of mechanisms to commercialize our technology, to pilot it, to prove it. And I believe that we can do it in a pan-Canadian effort. We can bring together the nickel miners and the lithium miners and the graphite miners, for that matter, on the other side of things, to form a completely integrated supply chain. And the value to integrating the supply chain is not only just creating the business.
Thank you, Mr. Blondell. I apologize again, but I do have to cut you short there.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cannings. Okay, Mr. Patzer, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start with Mr. Cleary here. It's great to see that you got a mining project underway here. I'm just curious to know how long of a process does it take to go from from beginning phase to operation phase? Like how long is that process, and what's that journey been like for you, for your company?
We started as a greenfield project in 2008, and have worked all the way from essentially discovering the deposit to developing the geological data set to going through feasibility and environmental studies over the years, to garnering local support with the natives, municipalities, and provincial, working and reworking various studies to make sure that the project would meet the ESG requirements that we had set out as an organization. Traveling the world to sell the project in terms of finding investors, because investors in this space are, there are not a lot of them, and it requires specialty expertise to understand some of the details of projects like this. It's not as simple as, you know, maybe a gold project or a copper project. There's many steps to it. And reworking the business plan a number of times to make sure that the economic returns to those investors were sufficient, and working with government in terms of related infrastructure, bringing power. We have power that goes by our project about 25 kilometers, but it's got to be brought to site. There's other things that have to be done. And building a management team that's capable to manage the construction, and then do the ramp up in operations. So it's a long journey. We've invested over $150 million to date in this project, and we expect to see its fruition in the next couple of years.
Okay, so we're looking probably with like 15 years probably would be timeline. In other jurisdictions,
I would say 10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years. Okay, so if you were in the United States, or if you were in Australia, if you're in some other jurisdiction around the world, would it be 10, 15 years as well?
Could be, depending on the political incentive. A lot of this is about social acceptance, political will. You have to have the rocks and minerals to be able to do that. In Canada, we're blessed with this. And what could reduce the timeline from conception of a project to its commercial production would be, from my perspective, a strategy that the government has to allow big projects to come to market. And I think this is partly what Canada's missing. So we have all the rocks. We've got most of the minerals. We have a tremendous amount of expertise. We have some, but not all of the capital, but we really don't have a plan, and it's not easy to see how these things can be done without just the sheer will of entrepreneurs like that have backed myself and my team at BlackRock Metals.
Well, one other thing that I found interesting that you said earlier was, when you're seeking capital for this project, that you're going around the world looking for that because there's expertise in other regions of the world. Does that leave the Canadian industry susceptible to, I'm going to say, nefarious players like, we know that the Chinese government, per se, is involved in a lot of operations, taking over companies, but doing that for a strategic advantage for China, and it leaves the rest of us at a disadvantage. Is there any potential problems with that scenario where, because we don't have the production capacity and the timeline approvals here in Canada, that we're susceptible to takeovers from other countries or from other companies that have not the best of intentions at heart?
Yeah, well, I think intentions aside, because it's always hard to see what those are, we have all the expertise here to be able to do it. We should be building our own projects. We should be developing our own companies and growing our own companies. We know that's what creates economic wealth in our country. We, as a management team, we've been to every country in the world looking for capital for our project. It does open us up to the agendas of others that aren't necessarily aligned with our national agenda. So I would say that, it's a give and take. We want to bring in foreign direct investment. This project alone is bringing in over $700 million of foreign direct investment into the country. And we want to be, sure that we're dealing with credible and responsible players who are bringing that capital. I think that's just what responsible Canadian companies should be doing, and in fact are doing, and we have rules around that.
Thanks, Mr. Cleary. I'm going to have to stop you there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, then thank you, Mr. Patzer. Mr. May, I believe you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'll be directing my questions also to Mr. Cleary from BlackRock. And before I get into that, I want to remind my colleagues who just asked a few questions there that the scenario that we were talking about, they were in government for most of that time, and there was a series of acquisitions that were in there under their watch from foreign countries. So I'm not sure they want to be throwing too many stones there, but I will suggest, Mr. Cleary, that our government, one of the reasons we're doing this study right now is because we recognize that a plan is necessary, and I agree with you that getting to that point, getting to a plan is something that we all agree would be beneficial to provide certainty and recognition for the industry. My question is going to be very specific, or the first question is going to be very specific. The members of this committee won't be surprised, as my interests lie very, very much in the nuclear industry, having ATS, BWXT, and others in my riding. And I was very interested in your opening comments about vanadium specifically, and I recognize that it is a very critical element within the nuclear industry. And I'm wondering if maybe you have any insight on potential threats, really, with expansion, with the refurbishment projects at, say, Bruce Power, if we don't have a proper supply chain of this particular mineral.
Well, I think it's critical. Thanks for your question. It's critical for nuclear and many other uses and industries, albeit it's niche and compared to other minerals like precious metals and base metals like copper and nickel. And the processing of those components can be done for the most part in North America, although that has been under pressure, I would say, over the last 20 years. And more of this processing is going offshore, to Asia and other parts of the world, and that is dangerous. That's what I'm talking about, securing the supply chain. So it is critical to secure the supply chain for nuclear as it is for steel. Without these two things, we don't really have a modern economy in the modern world. These are at the forefront, and I think that's, from my perspective, where government should start, which is, what are the most important elements of our modern society, and how do we secure those elements which are already here, we've got them, and building an integrated supply chain along the lines of what some of the other witnesses have suggested. Doing that in a way where you have entrepreneurs who want to do that. The challenge has been the ability to do it, and the capital to do it, and the environmental steps. It's difficult to get these projects approved environmentally. So red tape removal from environmental, but dealing with responsible companies that are focused on ESG, that's the way to go, and having a plan.
Can you elaborate on how the market shifted over, say, the last, say, decade in this space, and how has that affected BlackRock's plans to develop and process these minerals?
By market, do you mean like the minerals market or the capital market?
Specifically minerals.
Well, I would say for, in terms of titanium, we have, good production of titanium out of Canada and Quebec, really from one, supplier. But we have massive titanium resources in the country that are undeveloped. Vanadium, Quebec could be a world leader in vanadium, and it could be a world leader in refined iron products done in a very sustainable way, using the processes that we're using in terms of gray hydrogen and moving to green hydrogen when these things are available. And Quebec is uniquely set up to be able to do this because we've got the iron resources and we have green electrical energy. Canada in general is very well set up because we also have large supplies of natural gas, which can supply gray hydrogen. And I think it's important for the government to recognize that if you're going to have a hydrogen strategy, you got to start with gray hydrogen, which is coming from natural gas. And yes, in the early days, you're going to have emissions from that, but you can quickly move to a green hydrogen strategy or a blue hydrogen strategy over time. But that's got to be driven by the willpower of government,
Thank you, Mr. Cleary. I'm going to have to stop you there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. May. Okay, members, that takes us to the end of the second round. We're supposed to stop at 12:30 and move on to committee business. So we have two options. We can just proceed into the third round, in which case we'll get to Mr. Zimmer and Ms. Jones, and we can stop there. Or we can amend the time and give Liberals and Conservatives each 3 minutes, stick to the 2.5 minutes for the Bloc and the NDP. That'll take us past 12:30 and get us through this whole round. I still think we can probably get our committee business done in that time. Does anybody object to amending it, or do you want to just stick to the schedule? No objection? Okay. So Mr. Zimmer, I'll give you the floor then for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. Mr. Cleary, I only have 3 minutes. So I'll get after it. You talked about Canada being left behind unless we do something about it. And then you just talked about securing our future. You also talked about red tape being a limiter in what our industry is capable of doing. I'm up in northern BC. We do natural resources here. We mine, we go after oil and gas, forestry, etc. How do we not get left behind? And I know that's a real broad question for 2 minutes, but do your best.
Sure. I think my suggestion would be to focus on the big industries where we could use capital injection. I would focus at least in Eastern Canada on iron and producing green steel. If we had a green steel strategy in this country, it would drive so much innovation in mining and metallurgy and everything in between. All of a sudden, we would have a driving need for ferroalloys, okay, which would drive the supply of the battery minerals, okay, because it's, those critical minerals for battery are all related to these other supply chains. So if you have already existing demand from, for example, the steel industry, and you can produce, the world steel industry is going through a global shift, and we want to make sure we're not left behind on that. The shift to green steel driven by hydrogen and existing technologies which are commercialized, that's the way to go. Once we have that, then we have a built-in demand for ferroalloys. Those ferroalloys, many of them are critical minerals. That's going to be the supply for the battery and electric vehicles. I hear a lot of talk here about electric vehicles. To me, that's the end. It's not the beginning. How do you make a car? You need steel and you need the other materials, okay, that are driven for the cars and the batteries and everything else. So to me, that's where it starts and stops. And we have a massive supply of iron. We have a massive supply of hydroelectric power and the ability to make hydrogen in this country. And that's where we should be focused.
I have a feeling that's my time.
You've got about 30 seconds left, but if you
Okay,
were to waive
perfect.
it, that would...
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I would just would like to talk about if you were to remove Mr. Cleary red tape specifically, give us a general focus on what that would be, what that would look like.
Questions from, so the number one thing that we spend time and money on is answering questions of the governmental and analysts at the environmental agencies. And not that these questions aren't good, but they're continuous for years and re-asking of certain questions in different ways, asking us to retest things that we've already tested, or you could interpret the results one way or the other.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We've amended the schedule, so I'm going to have to be pretty strict here. Okay, Ms. Jones, for you for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Hood, actually. In November, the Government of Canada partnered with the Government of Quebec to invest $2 million to develop a 135-ton electric dump truck that was to be tested and validated at ArcelorMittal's mine. Can you tell us about this project and what its implications are in the electrification of other heavy vehicles? And also, can you answer for me the question around the Government of Canada's critical mineral list and how that aligns with the manufacturing process for many of the components of a project like this?
Okay, thank you for your question. Okay, regarding the truck, it's a good example of an ecosystem coming together to prototype a new type of truck, 100% electric, that will be tested at Nouveau Monde Graphite mining site next year, who intends to be 100% electric. So it's a good example of a 100% Canadian, locally manufactured, locally developed, with the Quebec expertise that will be then tested here and then could be exported around the world. So this is a very, very interesting example of an alliance for the supply chain, a local supply chain. I don't know if you had other specific question on that project.
No, that's good, but I'll move to Mr. Blondell if I have enough time, Chair. When he spoke earlier, he said he's really agnostic in terms of where they source their lithium from. So I guess I would have to ask him, like, what's his thoughts on the idea of Canada developing more critical minerals domestically to ensure a low risk steady supply to businesses like that he's operating.
I'm sorry, did you first wanted me to answer your second question? Because I did not yet.
If there's enough time, you can go ahead. I'm sorry.
You've got about 30 seconds for whatever is going to happen here. So
okay,
just jump in.
Very quickly for the list that you mentioned, I think it's a very important first step so that we can identify what we need to work on strategically, and then really work on a second transformation to attract foreign direct investment, and to work on all the other next steps. But it's the first strategic step to really go further and integrate it with all the other actions that we are taking in that field.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Okay, over to Mr. Smart for 2.5 minutes.
Very quickly, I remember one of our witnesses talked about the importance of strategic reserves of critical minerals. So that raises the matter of national security, which we did not address. But having waged the fight for aluminum, I know that in the United States that aluminum produced in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean is a national security issue. I wonder if we shouldn't have the same type of policy. Could Mr. Breton comment on this, please? Absolutely. We do think it's a national security issue. If we're not sure of having control of our strategic mineral resources, we run the risk of finding ourselves in a situation where we would not have a Canadian supply chain or electrification of transport. And there are precedents. You talked about aluminum, but I think back to 2000, 2010 in the States for national security reasons. There are companies, gas company, one that I will not name, where the U.S. federal government said that for national security reasons, the acquisition will not be allowed of these companies. In Canada, you'll recall a Saskatchewan initiative on potassium, which was going to be purchased by foreign interests. And Stephen Harper at the time had decided that for national interest issues to block that purchase. So when you talk about electrification of transport, or when you talk about critical minerals or rare earth minerals, we're talking about electronic products, and you're also talking about military matters. One organization that underscored this a few years ago, that we're starting to lose control for strategic reasons, was the Pentagon. The U.S. Army said if we don't wake up, we'll find ourselves with China, with itself has stopped exporting its strategic minerals outside of the country for strategic interests. Well, I think that Canada, in the agreement between Trudeau and Biden, was no doubt for strategic reasons. What can we do to make sure we don't find ourselves in a situation of dependency like we saw with oil and the Middle East in the 20th century, where we had geopolitical challenges? So I think that this is something that needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simard. Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I think I'll turn to Mr. Clary and talk about hydrogen again and what the government can do there. I was talking to someone in the hydrogen sector a couple of days ago, and their main comment, and first of all, they pointed out that Canada has a tremendous amount of technical know-how when it comes to hydrogen in the world. We're one of the leading technical hydrogen countries around, but to build out that innovation, we need real infrastructure to move the hydrogen, etc. And she likened it to the government building the infrastructure of roads or building the infrastructure of electric transmission lines. This is something that these hydrogen companies can't afford to do on their own. This is something where the government could really help. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that as to where do you think the federal government could really help in terms of actually taking on some of the actual infrastructure problems that are faced with a lot of this, the new clean energy, and specifically with hydrogen.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a tough one. For us, what we've done is, look, we've got utilities that deliver natural gas. We have reforming technologies that allow us to take natural gas to produce hydrogen. And that's where I think we should start in terms of a plan, which is to focus on those industries that are willing and able to take and produce gray hydrogen as a first step, and then backfill to either incent those companies to do carbon capture so that we're using effectively blue hydrogen, and then finally to work with the electrical utilities. Like, so for example, in Quebec, Hydro-Quebec is now created a hydrogen unit, but this has been, kind of slow going, and it's only in the last year or two that it's really got underway, and we need more emphasis on this, because if we can show that we're going to deliver commercial levels of hydrogen to industry, then the rest of the hydrogen strategy can follow that, because you'll have volumes of hydrogen being used. That's where we got to get to. To me, it starts with industry. It starts with the existing infrastructure, the natural gas, and then it's utilizing carbon capture move to electrolysis and electricity generated. And a lot of the same infrastructure can be used in terms of the gas utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Koenigs. Okay, over to Mr. McLean for 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. I thought we were just going to finish that round, Mr. Chair. No?
This is the same round. I just wanted to make sure we got the full round in.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll go back to, sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. Blondell at Nano One. Mr. Blondell, I understand that you are creating a process or a material that will do away with cobalt as a cathode for a battery. Is this correct?
We actually work on a variety of different cathode materials, and one of them does have no cobalt in it. That is correct.
Okay. How close to market is that?
I would say it's probably sort of 2 to 4 years away, depending on sort of commercial adoption in various regions around the world. Yes.
Well, thank you. As an ESG alternative, lower cobalt, I think, would be a huge step forward. And I thank you very much for pursuing that. And congratulations on your recent financing. It went very well, I understand. So yes. I'll move back to Mr. Breton again. And Mr. Breton, we talked about the electricity system and how we're going to have to build it going forward. I didn't hear your choice about how that actually has to be built and where we are going to get that power, given the fact that we're going to have to consume about twice as much power in a static scenario in the next 30 years with all the applications coming on here. As we replace power, what do we replace that with? Please.
Okay. So as I said before, since electric mobility takes a lot less energy than, let's say, gas or diesel vehicles, we will need less. We won't have to double the amount of energy that we have to use now from electricity. So because of vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, what we'll be able to do is be a lot more efficient with our energy. The electric grid right now, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you heard that, but the electric grid right now is not as smart as it could be, but with those systems, because we are charging, most of the people are charging at night.
So I did hear this. I did hear this, and I understand this.
Okay, so
Nevertheless, we're going to need more power at the end of the day. You're telling me we won't need more hydroelectricity. We won't need more uranium. We're just going to fumble through with a more efficient system.
Well, both. I mean, we will need more energy, but not that much more energy to compensate, because since electric mobility is so much more efficient than gas mobility.
Well, thank you. So we do need more energy. Can you tell me where it's going to come?
Well, I don't know if you heard about. There seems to be some kind of.
It's okay now.
Okay, so as I said, more wind power, more water power, more solar power, and the price of that energy is going down really quickly. I don't know if you heard about the fact that there was a wind power project that had been accepted in Alberta, which was just over 3.4 cents per kilowatt hour. So with these new projects linked with geothermal energy, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, and more hydropower, we'll be able to have affordable energy, cleaner energy, and it will be more than sufficient to meet the demand.
Thank you, Mr. Breton. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Okay, last up is Mr. Sidhu for 3 minutes or less if he feels so disposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I just wanted to give anybody the opportunity to kind of chime in here. I know some of the answers were cut off due to lack of time. If anybody wants to add anything else, that we're talking about a very, very interesting topic here, and then I just want to give the witnesses any opportunity to add on your answers here. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Button.
If I can say something,
please.
As other people have mentioned, I think we need a national electric mobility strategy, going from mining, materials, metals, supply chain, and the old supply chain, so that we can have a clear vision of where we are going in the future for Canada. Right now, we don't have that strategy. We have a hydrogen strategy, which makes total sense, but we need an electric mobility strategy so that we have a national vision for creation of jobs, transition in jobs, and obviously a a good transition to lower the greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in Canada.
Thank you for that, Mr. Breton.
Mr. Thibault has his hand up, I believe.
Yeah, and actually, just to add on what Mr. Breton just said, and also to follow up on what Mr. Blondell said, and also Mr. Cleary, the importance here is to do some kind of SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and map the whole supply chain, and then say, okay, for those weaknesses that we have, we need to build and work on R&D projects. And for those strengths and opportunities, we need to focus investment there and stimulate, those areas where we have the most potential to develop our supply chain. And as Mr. Blondell was saying, doing so is most likely to be focusing on CAM production, cathode active materials, and also cell making. And by doing that, you will be providing clients to those upstream. And so facilitating also market access to upstream projects such as mining projects. And this is how Europe has been developing its supply chain. And in my views, that's how we should be developing it. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Blondell had his hand up, and then we can move over to Ms. Hood.
Yeah, maybe I'll just echo that same thing. Look, we believe that integrating the supply chain is going to create the kind of demand we need for the sort of critical minerals within Canada, and certainly by integrating, we can also make it more efficient, clean it up, green it up, and make ourselves a very sort of competitive clean technology supply chain throughout the world. And so integration is really required there. And in our mind, piloting that integration is really key. So that goes from mining to refining to conversion to cathode all the way through to the cell production. And that's where we look to the government for support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Hood, very quickly, and then we'll stop there.
I just want to piggyback on Mr. Thibault's idea, was to say that Europe is doing exactly what he said they were doing, but we still have the natural resources. And this is really the key item here. We're lucky enough to have this combination of natural resources, which other regions do not necessarily have this chance, and we should seize this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. As you can see, there's a lot of ground to cover here, and there would be a lot more questions if we had the time, but we don't, unfortunately. But we do want to say thank you. You're the last panel on the study, and it was a very interesting group, and we're incredibly grateful for your time and the effort you put into coming here today, informing us as you did, and making us bringing this to a conclusion on a very positive note. So thank you all very much. You're free to go, and as for everybody else, if you could log off and then log back in, and we can move into the in-camera session. Thank you.